Hi, we're quickly going to go over the whole process of making an image like this into a map for Ages of Conflict. And step number one, of course, is searching if the map you want is already made. On the Galapagos Islands, there is none, so that's what we're going to make today. The best place to find maps is in Wikimedia Commons, which is like the free media repository used by Wikipedia. This topographic map of the island is freely licensed, so I can just, as long as I give credit and link back to it, I can do anything I want with it. This is the map. This is the website actually you're going to go to. You can find images like this. This one is going to be linked in the description, but you can find images like this by going to the Wikipedia page of whatever place you're trying to map, and then from there you can find links to its category on Commons. Another good place is mapsforfree.com. These maps are public domain, and as you can see, the height map is really nice. I use this one to make my Panama map, which has been doing the rounds on the workshop. Uh, Maps for free is not perfect. For one, they don't tell you which projection this is, but worst of all, it's kind of crusty. You can see this from YouTube, but once you download these images, they have like hella bumps from JPEG compression. So it's limited. The smaller the area you're trying to map, the worse it is. Like, it's good for making something like this, but if you're trying to map stuff like these islands, it gets quite a bit crustier. Still, public domain, mapsforfree.com, also linked in the description. Here are the Galapagos. I'm using this map, and I just imported it into Krita. Here's Krita. Also free program. Uh, Here for comparison is the color scheme of the mapsforfree.com version. I'm going to keep both of these in case one of them can help us see things a bit more clearly. I also crop this image a bit. This is going to be the first step once you like download the Galapagos Island map or whatever other map you're trying to use. Download it and crop it so you remove like areas which are completely ocean and you won't use. There's a little bit of island here, which is why it goes so further to the left. Anyway, so we start editing this image, right? Wrong. First thing you want to do, make a copy of it, hide it. You need the original one to be able to compare. Otherwise, when you fuck up, I say when, not if, because I fuck up all the time doing these, you're gonna wish you had it saved. Anyway, the next thing you wanna do is drag in a key as a reference image. This is essentially the colors which are coded to mean special things in Ages of Conflict. I made this as a little reference image. Which colors are these, you ask? Their hex codes is in the guide posted by the developer. You can save it, and like now I can color pick from them. Very time consuming thing. You don't want to be checking in game for this. Uh, so once you have this key, which I will also link in the description for you, or maybe make a guide or something, now we are ready to start painting. There's several ways of like turning this into flat colors, which we can use. In some topographic maps, you can use a very cool creative function, which is filter artistic index colors. And it does what it says on the tin. It like squishes the whole image and splits the light, shadow, and mid values into 4 or 5 colors. You can like, for example, make it be even more basic, have even less intermediary colors like this. But there's a problem with these maps. As you can see, this is not cleanly isolating the hilly ground from the base ground, because if you look at the original images, they have shadows. Someone painted little shadows on the relief, which means this is being turned into a separate color instead of the bands of elevation that we want. In the Falklands map I used, the source map didn't have these shadows, so I just used, let me show it to you. Here it was. I just used filter artistic index colors, and I could turn this into these mountains basically for free, which is an option you should check. Always try to do things by index color first, but if that doesn't work, and it probably won't if you're using this map, then don't settle for a shitty looking fucking map. We're gonna do better. We're gonna do better. How? If you already saved a copy of this image, you don't need to worry about damaging it. So first things first is deleting all of the water. If we wanted actually, we could have a variant of this map where the shallow water like follows the actual underwater relief. I don't like doing this because I think when there are large areas of shallow water like this, the simulations are kind of bad. It doesn't really make sense to have like entirely marine exclaves and like little holdouts in the middle of the water, and that happens all the time, and it's just not very good. I prefer narrow crossing bridges, which is why I'm going to keep, and I do this for all my maps, I'm going to keep the earth relief clean and accurate, but the ocean relief I kill, I delete it. You could try selecting like this, like a chump, and if it's not selecting enough colors, you can go to tool options and increase the threshold on the magic wand, which is going to make it select a wider range of colors. One thing I urge you to do, if you're just starting to make your own maps, tiny little islands always look terrible with automatic selection like this. You should take the lasso. I'm holding shift to add to the selection instead of replace it, or alt to remove from the selection instead of replace it, in case you're removing selection from the water like this. And you should like increase them a little bit like this. And it doesn't need to be perfect. You don't need to select whole pixels, but not here, because here is an interesting bait, it's an interesting shape. But you're gonna find stuff like this where stuff looks really bad and you should probably select a little bit more of it. I always try to do this when an island is tiny, like 1 or 2 pixels, I enlarge it a little bit, because otherwise, gameplay wise, it's gonna suck and it's just gonna look ugly. The whole deal of making AOC maps is like managing to make something that looks good, but that also plays good. And I'm gonna show you how to balance these things. Uh, Accuracy will be respected over land, but honestly, if your map is completely accurate, but kind of dog-ass to simulate, if there are never interesting borders in it, then I don't like it. And I think these little liberties we take are important. Not really liberties, because like we're correcting a map that is very poor resolution. Anyway, I enlarged some of the smaller selections, like over here. Again, I'm holding Alt to remove selection, and I can hold Shift to add selection, like this, instead of replace. I'm assuming you already know a lot about Creed. I'm like speeding. I apologize. If this is confusing, you can like ask shit in the comments. I'll try to answer you. Anyway, gone. I have deleted the ocean. I'm going to add an empty layer, call it deep water. Color pick from deep water is just white, but for the sake of showing the utility of this. And here we go. So we have deep water, and on top of it we have the land layer. In case you're wondering, deep water obviously, so you can't colonize it. Crossings are water which you can cross, duh. Land is the normal terrain. And 99% of maps in this game are bad because they only have land. They don't use desert and hills and mountains, so they're not very pretty to look at. They're just black blobs. In case you're wondering the effect of these other lands, desert massively nerfs the gold a nation occupying it gains. It's not very productive. And it nerfs movement speed just a little bit. And hills is the opposite. Hills nerfs your advancing speed massively and nerfs your income a little bit. And mountains are impassable. So I'm gonna take my base land layer, which I'm gonna name base land. I'm also going to duplicate it. And this other land, I'm going to click on this little button over here on the corner. I apologize if this is small and hard to see. And then clicking this means I can paint on top of it and it won't add any color in transparent pixels. So I can do stuff like this, and I can paint it black to be our base land. However, pay close attention. If you paint like this with a normal pencil brush, the corners of your brush are kind of this gradient aliased shit. And what that means is they're going to be converted to the closest color the game recognizes, which might not be land, it might be hills or desert or whatever. So don't do this. Always try to paint with a very hard pixel art brush like this, which Krita already has, so that the edges are nice and crisp, and you always know what color you're placing down. Anyway, sorry about that, long detour. Hope this is understandable. I'm rushing a little bit. All right, we have a base layer. I'm gonna name it land. Unhide the land layer on top of it, just for comparison. So next up, we need to add shallow waters. I recommend, I always do this, not on my Falklands map because that was my first and I didn't know what I was doing, but if you look at my Panama map, the coast is surrounded by a thin layer of like shallows, except in key places where I didn't want crossings to just bulldoze over the place, like the Panama Canal. Always add these little crossings all around. Why? Here's why. Armies can't advance on the diagonal. So if you do this, add a little stray pixel here. This pixel, once an army takes over this land, is going to remain unclaimed. Like no one can get to it because there's deep water and armies can't advance on the diagonal. And if you look around this image, there's lots of these little stray pixels which cannot be accessed by anyone, and they stick out like a sore thumb once you're running a simulation. So you would need to like go around your coast cleaning them one by one. Instead of doing that, you can just add a little bit of crossing so that if I have a pixel like this, and then let me color pick, and I have a bunch of water crossing here, you can get to it. Okay, so take your brush, paint water crossings around it, right? No, it's gonna look like shit. Our goal here is to do as little work manually as possible because we are bad. We're bad at the video game. So go to your land layer, select opaque, replace. I have, as you can see, selected everything that is the land layer. I'm going to go to select, grow selection by however many pixels you want. I'm going to go with 4. Done. See? We have added a little bit of fat around the land. Make a new layer. We're going to name it shallow water or something. Color pick from the crossing. And paint it. Again, using the hard brush. Okay, now move this layer under the land layer. And there you go, you have a wonderful coastline. Look, it looks awesome. This is already more polished than 99% of maps. Not 99, there's some pretty good people in the workshop. But maps drawn by hand generally don't have coastlines this good. Our next step is connecting all of the islands. And to do this, select a brush, still the hard brush, click on the line tool, and we're going to draw lines between the islands. There's one thing I urge you not to do. Don't do this. This is for gameplay, not aesthetics, but look at this. Incredibly thin, incredibly long line. This is hell for armies to advance through. It makes no sense that you should have a bottleneck on the ocean. So I urge you to make these lines a little bit longer, thicker, I mean, when they're this long, so that this tiny little island that shouldn't be very defensible doesn't become an impregnable fortress. Unless you want it to be, of course, but this is generally frustrating. Um, as you can see, like I have a map of the workshop that is like Metro 2033. I made the Moscow Metro. Obviously, in that situation, the tunnels are like hella tight because it's meant to be claustrophobic. Anyway, I'm gonna make it like a little bit thicker like this. I'm gonna start connecting the islands. And this kind of looks like shit for now. I promise you it's gonna look better. You will see. You will see. Anyway, another thing I urge you not to do. Whenever possible, don't have like single long lines between island chains. What do I mean by this? Like over here. I connect this, I connect this. Let's imagine like we're making a very small map and this is our whole world. This crossing should be a thing. Like it doesn't make a lot of sense to be completely unable to approach an island except from one side. And when doing a lot of testing with the Panama map, I found that it's always more entertaining. Like you get cooler borders when every single archipelago can be approached from two different ways. So for example, at least two different ways, I should say. So for example, these little islands, I connect them, of course, but I also make a bridge between this peninsula. And then I connect this to this island and this to the continent. But I don't make a single lane between these two islands. I also connect one of these strategic points to this island. And then this island is connected to this island. And this to this. And this to this. But it makes no sense to have this advance without this also being a thing. I don't connect every single one of them. Sometimes I leave like a little bit of a place where like, yeah, you only get one attack. Like it's sometimes it's cool to have a little fortress which is a little harder to take. But I generally prefer to do stuff like this. I prefer to have two lanes of attack always. In islands like this, I don't use lines. I usually just paint them together like this because I wanted to have a little bit more personality. Should mention I'm doing this with a mouse. Later we're going to be painting mountains by hand, but you don't need a tablet to paint any of this. Let me make this a little bit thicker. Another example here. Whenever I see a little peninsula like this, I like to connect it to this place instead of having just one lane over here. I think it makes a bit more sense. Though these look kind of ugly because they're really thin, connecting really large spots. So you can do stuff like this. Make it thicker. Don't make every single lane the same thickness. You should like balance them around gameplay, not only looks. And speaking of looks, this kind of looks dog ass. You can see I drew a line here and then I drew a line here. One thing I like to do is like come in with the brush and smooth the points around the islands so that it doesn't look like this, like this. Little lines that have like these little bumps that show, oh yeah, he made a line, then he made another, and he never polished these. Like don't do this. Another thing you can do to make your lanes more interesting. When the landing occurs, taper it out, like add a little bevel, like this, like this. It makes all the difference. Are we recording? Please tell me we're recording. um, these little tapers. Let me show you the Panama map again. Like I think it looks a lot better because of them. You can see when you zoom in here that there's a little bit of a like give over here. Once this lane reaches the land, a little bit of a give, like it spreads out. Over here, the landing spreads out. It's not just this. It like has a little bit of a taper, and I think this makes islands look a lot better. Like over here, erase these little stray pixels. We're basically doing manual cleanup. I like having pretty maps that play well. Maybe you don't care about the gameplay, or maybe you don't care about the visuals. That is entirely valid. This is just my way of making maps. I think the only wrong way of making maps is taking the in-game editor and drawing on it, because those maps end up looking really bad. If you're using an external program, you can do anything you want. You shouldn't be using Photoshop though. Fucking sucks. Unless you pirate it. Anyway. More crossings. Like always, I never do a single chain. I always try to do 2 connections. I try to think of interesting situations. Excuse me for my pronunciation, by the way. Interesting situations that may arise from the map. For example, in Panama, this whole canal was shallow water in my first test, but borders kind of completely ignore the canal. They just like bulldoze past it. So I made a little bit of it deep water and added just 3 crossings. And that made borders naturally stop around the canal when 2 armies met and started fighting here. Getting past the canal became a slightly rarer occurrence, which makes complete sense, right? It's supposed to be a defensible position. It's harder to leap the canal than it is to advance through like farmland or whatever. I try to think of interesting situations and reproduce them naturally in the map. Once we're done with these, we are going to make the land actually pretty interesting to play in. Because old maps were like completely land blocks and they didn't have any relief. They didn't show the hills and the mountains. I think those are generally pretty boring. I think they're a bit boring to look at and they don't play very well. The thing is, once you add mountains to your map and hilly terrain around those mountains, then what happens kind of sort of naturally is that you get like these holdouts in the hills because hills are harder to advance through. And so you naturally get like these insurgencies, little remnants in the hills, which is really interesting and makes complete sense for this simulation. Like, you should be thinking about things like that. You should be making hill tribes and spots where insurgencies can hold up, and spots where remnants of kingdoms can stay without being instantly bulldozed. Because there's nothing more boring than a big map split between 2 nations. You want lots of little things happening to make your world interesting, I think. This is starting to look okay. I have a bit more experience drawing with a mouse because of my job. Maybe this is hell to you. We're gonna go over next a little tip which might make this more bearable to you. Anyway, this map is, like I said, playable now. You could, if you want to use the accurate relief, you could like select the whole continental shelf around the islands and make all of this shallow water. I think it plays poorly in simulations, But if you want to do that, then keep this other image around. You could make, for example, an alternative version of an image. Since I'm not going to do that, I'm going to now select, click on the land layer, select opaque, replace. Then I'm going to click on the shallow layer, select opaque, add, adding to the selection, not replacing it. Would you look at that? I accidentally made a border of like shallow land. Let's fix that real quick. Sorry about that. I've failed you for the last time. Anyway, gonna select my shallow land. I just remember shallow crossings here completely contain the land, so I don't need to select it separately. Image, trim to selection. Krita sometimes glitches out and selects like transparent things outside of your purview. So I'm gonna just select like this, trim to selection, and I'm gonna do it again. Click on the shallows, select opaque, image, trim to selection. This perfectly trims out the parts of ocean where there is no nothing. However, here there's a potential problem. If your island ends like this, touching the map, and if there was also map over here, and if you forget the like looping maps section toggled on, it could interpret this small archipelago as a world map. And so your troops start leaving the east and coming out in the west. So what you can do is select, image, resize canvas. And I'm going to add a single pixel of width and a single pixel of height. Okay. I did the opposite. I actually removed one. Okay. Resize canvas. Width +1. Height +1. Okay. Now, as you can see, we have a little border of 1 pixel, which I'm going to paint white because it's going to be a part of the ocean. We said white. And now your maps won't loop on accident. Except the wheel, because it's not working. This is embarrassing. Right. Herein lies the problem. You need to increase it by 2 pixels. One for this side, one for this side. Yeah, embarrassing. Image, resize canvas. And increase this by 2 pixels. Increase this by 2 pixels. Okay. Paint this outline white. Now, as you can see, we have a little bit of a barrier, which stops accidental map loops. This also reminds me of the map size. In this game, generally, I don't know what is like if you look in the guides, the developer has like a size limit. This size limit is generally for performance, but as you can see, there are ways of bypassing it. Scenarios can be made much bigger than the max recommended here, and they still run fine if you have a good computer. I think the developer, like in game, the maximum size is 600 by 600. You shouldn't be afraid of making like 1,000 by 1,000 images when you're making custom ones like this, but I'm still gonna downscale this image, probably. The problem, of course, is that if you have teeny tiny islands like this, and you scale image to new size, and let's go, for example, 1,000 by 900, okay. From out here, nothing's changed. From up close, tragedy. Your image is now aliased and all of those crisp pixels are gone. How do you stop this from happening? Well, when you scale the image down, filter nearest neighbor, like this This is how you scale images down or up while keeping them sharp. Although it looks pretty bad when you use this filter to scale up. Okay. So from far over here, it looks okay. Little islands might be really bad now. They might be like just 1 or 2 pixels. And if I undo, you can see these little cute little island chains are completely gone. Like, let's do that again. Reduce scale image. Like, they're kind of ugly, kind of joined. This is the tragedy of resolution. No matter how many pixels you add, you will always have like a little like tiny dirt bank that is too small to show up in your maps. So everything is a trade-off, right? I'm gonna scale this down a little less to just, let's say, 1400. I think that doesn't fuck it up too much. But if you downscale your image, and there is an argument to be made that this should have been the first thing I ever did when I got the raw image. I should have downscaled it. But I don't like doing that because I like having more pixels to work with when doing the color selection. I think you get cleaner selections like this. Still, once you downscale your images, it might be worth it to like come here and like just do a little bit of a touch up in your islands. Don't care about accuracy as much as making them look a little bit prettier in this stage. Like very blocky islands are ugly. Single pixels like this are really bad. They're hard to place armies on. So I tend to do this. I tend to do this. Stuff like this. It's a little bit more work than if I downscale the image first things first, but I think it makes maps look a little bit nicer. Make sure you're always painting on the right layer, otherwise later can give you a headache. And what this means, this touch up I do, you can always compare. Like over here, I have a little stray pixel, but if you look at the normal image, it's all one big island, and it became a little pixel because of like the compression of the colors. So I'm just gonna fix that. The result of me doing this little pass and kind of fattening these little islands a little bit is that the size of the smallest sandbanks is a little exaggerated in my maps. I think this is a positive thing. I think when maps are have islands which are like 1 or 2 pixels, they don't have a lot of potential in the simulation. Like you can't do anything with them. So you might as well like erase them. Okay. This map is playable now. Quickly save this as a layered file, Galapagos. However, like I said, it looks ugly because there's no relief. Look at the Galapagos for a second. Why are they interesting? Because they're covered in volcanoes, man. How are you going to take all of these volcanoes and leave all of this detail and personality out of your simulations? They're going to look like shit and they're going to play like shit. So we take the base land, the copy of the base land which we made, and we isolate the hilly terrain. There are many ways of doing this. Like I said, you could do filter artistic index colors and do stuff like this. If your map looks better, I think it's not playing well with these shades. You could try to select by colors. And if you do it and it selects like everything, just reduce the threshold over here until you have something a bit more acceptable like this. Like this is starting to look good, the area around these hills. But like you can see, you're gonna need to clean it up like a lot. So I'm going to show you how I tend to do this. In maps like this, where I can't do an automatic selection, I select by hand the hilly terrain, and this is naturally going to be a very smooth selection, which is not necessarily good for mountainous terrain, right? Because it's hilly terrain. It's supposed to be a little bit craggy. So I'm going to use a brush pack in order to paint little pieces of hilly terrain without giving myself carpal tunnel, right? Link as always in the description. I'm using a little brush pack called Stipple Beast. It is meant for excuse me. It is meant for, like the name says, little art that looks like stipples. The artist that made it is a beast. I love their style. And we are going to be using it to improve these hilly terrains. I should do a little bit more over here. Uh-huh. This hilly terrain will still have armies be able to go through it. They're just going to be slower, which means it's going to be easier to resist there if you are cornered as an army. I said cornered really weirdly. I apologize. I hope you're not one of those people which are scared of accents and loud noises. Over here, I'm going to be a little bit more generous with my selection because I don't want this island to be entirely flat. Okay, I have a selection. Like always, make a new layer, call it hills, leave it on top of the land layer, color pick from the hills, use the normal pixel art brush. Why is it not painting? Right, because the base land is on top. I'm a genius. I'm going to paint these volcanoes in. I will be the first one to say it. This looks kind of ugly. This mountainous terrain look like blobs. The coastline is like perfectly craggy and interesting and full of personality. The volcanoes aren't. They aren't because I painted it by hand. And you need to do as little by hand as possible. Otherwise, everything looks kind of blobby. So I'm going to select my custom brushes, which you can find on the description for free, by the way, though you should throw a tip to the artist. I'm going to lower the opacity of this top layer so that I can like see what's underneath, but still see it a little bit. And now I'm going to show you how this brush pack works. Look, if I do it like this, these little blobs are naturally a bit crookier than they would be if I use the normal pixel art brush. Let me just show you that one in comparison. Like this one is kind of smooth and round and blobby, whereas these are like naturally more along the lines of what you would expect in terrain where people go to do rock climbing and bouldering and whatever. Delete all of these. So with one eye on the reference layer and the other on the hills layer, I'm going to go around this volcano and I'm going to add a little bit of hilly terrain to it with a very small brush size, like this. This is harder to do here because these volcanoes are like geologically recent, which means they are very, very, very round and smooth. You shouldn't worry about going a little towards artistic freedom territory if it makes your map play better. My Panama map, the mountains were very blobby in the first release. Someone pointed that out on the official Discord. So I took this brush and I made them a little bit craggier, right? And it plays better too once I did that. Let's see if this looks like ass. Doesn't look awesome, but it's going to look better once we have the mountain terrain on top of the hilly terrain. And it looks better than this, I think. These blobs, uglier than these. Let me show you that. Panama, here. Like, these islands were 50% color picked. These mountains were 50% color picked from Maps for Free, that website I showed you over here. But because I had a lot less pixels to work with than this simulation, I actually hand painted all of the mountains. And painting these mountaintops would have given me carpal tunnel, and I would have died if it wasn't for these brushes. So you should use them. It's a time saver and the end result looks better. There's several different ones you can test which one works better for you. This I think is too blobby, so I'll go back to the other one. These mountains are not impassable terrain, so you also don't need to worry about like making little isolated islands of them. If I hide this, for example, over here, there's a little bit of like rough terrain. So I'm gonna go to my hills and I'm going to paint it here like this, kind of emanating from this volcano. What matters is that your level of detail is consistent. So if over here I have blobs like this, and over here I have a bunch like of detail to the point where it's mostly straight pixels like this. Give me a second. Like clearly something is wrong. Over here the detail is tiny and over here it's blobby. You can have a map like this, you can have a map like this, but you shouldn't mix both. If that makes any sense. Starting to lose my voice. Okay. Click on the hills and keep drawing. These mountains we are painting reintroduce an issue which we previously fixed, which is tiles impossible to reach. For example, over here, these two tiles of like, because like these are hills, we're still painting hilly terrain, but if these were mountains, these two tiles in the middle would be like impossible to reach. There's a way of fixing all unreachable tiles, which more people should do. I was actually guilty of this in my original release of the Falkland Island maps. There was a lot of tiles near the coast which could never be reached. And the way to fix this is you start a scenario and you kill all nations except one. And then you let that one nation flood the entire map, starting from a single pixel. And every tile it never reaches suddenly sticks out like a sore thumb. So you can go into the in-game editor or go back to Krita and fix it. And luckily now the developers have added a way of updating maps on the workshop without deleting them outright. So now we are able to fix past mistakes like that. We are also going to go over the workshop submission process, by the way. One thing you should do is like try to paint the lines kind of following the natural terrain. So over here, for example, since this island is stretched north-south, sorry, English is hard. I'm going to make the mountains naturally stick out a bit more to the north and to the south, like this. Add little river valleys, like this. Like this. I'm not worrying about straight pixels because this is hilly terrain, it's not mountainous terrain, so it's not impassable. If you have a blobby thing like this, you can quickly erase it to get a little tip like this, and you get better terrain. I'm always like, when I'm painting, I'm switching between the brush and the eraser, and the brush and the eraser. This is easier on Krita. You can just press E and it toggles between erasing and painting if you're using the brush or the line tool. It's not like Photoshop where the eraser is a separate tool. Eraser here is a mode which you can use on either the brush or the line or the circle tool or whatever. Maybe a little bit too much over here. Let's erase some of this, because I don't want this to be too inaccurate. Let's check it out. Okay, so personally, I think this looks starting to look a lot better than like just these round blobs. Maybe you disagree. If you dislike terrain like this, you can make your own version of this map using mine as a base, because after all, I'm using a Creative Commons map, which means it can be reused without crediting. Without asking for permission, without paying me a cent. And all you need to do is credit, which means say the original map was made by me. And if you want, you can also add the images I used and credit them as well. And you have to link back to them and link to the Creative Commons license. If this is confusing to you, you can just look at the text in the description, and there's some Creative Commons credits over there which you can copy. Okay. I'm going to speed up a little bit over here because my voice is starting to go. So I'll go to baseline so I can see where there's a little bit of cragged, rocky terrain. If you're autistic like me, you can like spend hours improving these and making them fit the real terrain better. Ultimately, a map doesn't need to be perfect. It is as good as you're willing to make it. You can make a map in 10 minutes or you can make a map in days. I just urge you to not make it run like shit. For example, we have Warlord era Japan maps, and we have like 5 of them. And this isn't directing hate, but some of them are like clearly lazy, like just people are doing whatever, and some are very detailed. And the problem is that you lose time trying to find the better one and separate the good ones from the unacceptable ones. So in the interest of the time of everyone that is getting my maps on the workshop, I try to make them as good as possible. And there are errors. My Falkland Islands map had errors on launch. The Panama map islands didn't run as well as the current version. So you can go back and improve them. Maybe a little bit over here, since there are hills on the map. Like this. Kind of an S shape. Kind of. Okay. Starting from these, now we need the actual impassable mountainous terrain. Make a new layer. Mountains. Let's look at the base image. The volcano craters, I'm going to paint them as smoother shapes because I want them to be instantly recognizable as a round caldera. Interestingly, maps for free and this topographic map don't agree on the water. Over here, this basin shows up as dry. And if you look at the other map, it shows up as having a lake in there. And over here, this crater shows up as dry. But if you go to maps for free and you zoom in to the equator and you toggle the river water, there's a lake over there. You could go to Wikipedia and Google Earth and zoom in here and do research about these places to create a map as accurate as possible. Personally, I'm going to make every crater impassable. So in my map, it doesn't matter if it's impassable because of mountainous or impassable because of water. So color pick from the mountains. I'm going to switch away from this to the normal pixel art brush. Do this. Then make the brush a little smaller and erase. Like this. So you get this half crater shape, which can be refined, of course, with the custom brushes we have just shown you. So paint, make the brush a little bit smaller and erase. Paint, hold on. Paint and erase. Paint rounder this time, a little bit smaller, erase. Paint, a little bit smaller, erase. Oop, don't know what I'm doing here. Hold on. So, what gameplay effect will these craters have? Well, you can sort of nest little troops and holdouts in there. And this is going to be, I imagine, the last stand of many a fledgling nation, which is interesting for gameplay and also looks good on the map. Like this. Obviously, if you do something like this, hold on, over here is not a volcano, but I'll just demonstrate. If you do this, and then this, then all of these inner tiles here are impossible to reach because there are no planes in this game. You need to have a land route. And if you spawn a nation in here, it will just vibe there and ally with someone and give them money. But if that nation dies, or if there is no nation there to begin with, then this territory will always be unclaimed, which generally looks ugly, but might be something desirable for you. There's also a little crater here. Let me make this a bit more opaque, which kind of collapsed into the sea. Forgot the name of it. I'm gonna freehand it. Doesn't have to be perfect. Oh, I was on eraser mode. Silly me. Do it like this, and then obviously every time I freehand something, I switch to the custom brush and I make it a little less blobby and a little more jagged. Like this. If your mountains are like advancing into the ocean, one thing you can do over here on the side, select mountains, hills, and land by holding shift. Then come over here, add group layer. Oh, that didn't group them. So select them, hills, lands, mountain, right click, group, quick group, like this. Now I can hide all of my solid ground layers, and I can go over here to the hills, and I can click on this alpha mode right here. Give me a second. So that, oh yeah, not hills, mountains, sorry. Here. So that no matter how much I paint, check this out. No matter how much I paint, it will only show up where there is already land, which is quite convenient. So I'm gonna group all of the land, name is land group. Okay, and now we have this interesting cross shape. No, sorry, moon shape. A crescent by the seaside, which can be easily defended and which is not impassable because people can go around through the shallow water. Okay. The map nears completion. The map nears completion. This isn't going to be as interesting, I think, as the Panama map, because Panama had a mountain chain, and I love playing around mountain chains. You always get cool nations, and fighting around the canal and like bypassing these mountains by using these lanes was really nice. This one might have some potential though because of the volcanoes. Use the custom brush in a very small size to do stuff like this. Raise a little bit. Just draw out the crater. I want at least one side to be very round because these shapes will kind of pull the viewer's eye towards them. And they will immediately realize that like, yeah, this is a volcano or a caldera or a lake or something interesting. If our maps are not interesting, why bother? With that said, I will try to make every single archipelago I can think of. I love mapping island chains. And some of these will be boring, but it's okay. The whole world should be mapped in this game, ideally, if we have infinite time. Again, take care with these stray pixels. Some steep terrain here which no one will want to partake in. If you use this brush on the smallest size, it like naturally creates these interesting patterns for your hilly terrain. If you in general, if your brush is too large, then you know, blobby. We hate blobby terrain. Okay, stray pixel here. All right, that looks good. The map nears completion. Add some mountains over here. Connect them. Not sure about this because this area here will be like really OP, really hard to attack. Maybe like this, because after all, this is not a mountain ridge. It's just very hilly, rough terrain. We could go on. I might draw it here. I think this is a good demonstration. And you will, of course, be cursed to always be looking at your old maps and going, oh, I should have fixed this, I should have fixed that. Good news, you can. You can update your projects on the workshop. And you should make them better over time. But ultimately, there will be flaws in your project. Maps have limitations of scale. You can't add infinite detail in this game. It is what it is. The last thing I like to do is go over the blend edge and kind of make it less blocky. When you scale down an image, like it gets these huge square shapes, which look very ugly and not accurate at all if you look at the original maps. So I come in here with an eraser or the brush and I break them up just a little bit, like this. These stray pixels I think look ugly. I try to fix them like this. Look, single pixels like this generally in pixel art look awful. I think this island is called Rotunda Island or Redonda Island, which means the same thing, round. Not particularly round in my simulation, but I wanted to have a bit more personality, like I said. Nope, no bay here. I don't want to bore you, so I'm going to post this map. If the feedback comes in and people go, hey, these volcanoes suck, redo them, I will. If it is well received, or if there are no comments, which means not enough people care, I will move on to the next project. So, it seems like we have finished our map. It seems to be in a playable state. We have made the borders and sea lanes and everything else with interesting borders and interesting simulations in mind. And it looks like it's time to post. However, this map is 1200 by 1400 pixels. If we simply put this map into the custom maps folder, it is not going to show up in the game. It's not going to show up in the game because it's larger than the map size limit. This loops back to that thing I told you about, whereas you should build maps at a higher scale than the one you're going to post them at. Why? There's two reasons for this. Reason number one, like I told you, is that if you build your map based on the highest resolution possible source image, your end result is going to be better. Even though it is going to give you more work. Because when I resize this to, let's say, half its size, so 700 pixels in height, I need to always scale it with the nearest neighbor filter, otherwise it gets blurry. So once I downscale it, suddenly some things look bad, like these sea lanes maybe are a little bit too thin, and we need to remake them all. So yes, it is a trade-off, because make a map in a higher size and then polishing it and then repolishing it once you downscale it means you have to work twice, essentially. But it is my belief that it leads to nicer looking maps. The other reason for that is that you can use custom programs to make scenarios which bypass the map limit. These scenarios, some of which you can find in the workshop, can have an arbitrary size. I believe there's a world map with 2000 pixels on each side. However, you can only use this to make scenarios, not maps. Which means if you're interested in making a raw custom map like this, to keep on the workshop is not going to work. Unless, of course, you post both the downscaled raw maps like this, like I'm going to do, and you post the scenario, which is upscaled. If you go to Ages of Conflict, guides, one of the most popular guides is this. It's from the guy who made the plugin to create larger scenarios. You can download his file. Maybe there's a false virus alert, but I guarantee you it's false. Like, this is completely trustworthy. You can see the code on his GitHub. I have. And this is what we're going to do. We are going to keep a separate copy of this image on full resolution, and we are going to upload it as a scenario. Since these are the Galapagos Islands, we can do something like, I don't know, the different turtle species or something. But this is not today. This is for part 2 of this series. Today we are only going to care about vanilla resources without external tools, for time's sake. When you're watching this, I will have finished cleaning up this map. Probably gonna have a few revisions apart from posting it. But with that said, let's publish as it is right now so that I can show you a very common method of cleaning up your map and making it better. Because one switcheroo I just pulled is, I told you, is I actually introduced an error in this map, and we are going to first find it and then fix it. We are going to go into app data, local Joyce Park Games, Ages of Conflict, custom maps, Galapagos Islands. And then we are going to save it as a PNG. These two are usually checked by default. Uncheck store alpha channel, uncheck force convert to sRGB. Not the most important thing, but it means your images are going to be a little smaller at no downside. Okay, now we are going to open our game. Also, while the game opens, this game doesn't automatically refresh your folder. So if you have the game open and you save an image file, you need to close the game and open it back up so that it's going to recognize the new map you just added. Here's our map, Galapagos Islands. We can click on Share on Steam Workshop to post it, but I urge you to do this. Play it before you do. I'm going to max speed, select this nation. You don't need to do this, but I like to. Click this one, recolor, make it the most garish color you can, and wait for it to flood the map to see if there's any unreachable tiles. You may remember we cleaned up our unreachable tiles, but they were reintroduced when we downscaled the image, right here. There are some valleys which are completely unreachable, and if a nation spawns in there, then it's invincible. This is a thing to watch out for. It's very common for sudden unreachable pixels to show up if you change the scale of your image. There's another one here. So to fix this, you could use the in-game editor, of course. Select Galapagos Islands, edit, erase a few pixels. I don't like to do this because I like to keep this layered file updated. I like to make it be an accurate representation of the maps I have on the workshop so that I can edit it in the future and keep updating without needing to carry out these same changes twice. So I'm going to fix this on Krita on the same program we just used. We could continue to clean up this image. We could do stuff like less stray pixels because they look kind of ugly. We could make the shore a little bit less blocky, stuff like this. But I believe I've already passed you all of the basics. Let's post this. Save. Okay. One very minor thing. If you're in our folder, let me quickly head back over to the game folder. Jasper Games, Ages of Conflict, custom apps. If you overwrite this file, like we did some changes to the PNG and then we saved it again, Krita makes a backup file like this. You can keep it. It's basically the oldest version. And then you just remove the little tilde in the name and you have a working PNG file, which you can use. I'm not keeping this one because I made very small changes, but it doesn't break the game. It's just a little backup it creates over there. Useful for you to know. Never forget to credit the source of your maps. If you used maps for free, since they're public domain images, I would just say I took a screenshot from here. Since we are using this one, I'm going to scroll down, look at the version. It says it's Creative Commons. So I'm going to copy this. Eric Gaba, user Sting, William Chadwick from Oregon State University for bathymetry. Copy this. Go in here. These people worked for free to make that map. They're benefiting us, so we should credit them, right? Come over here. Map of the Galapagos, an archipelago famed for its natural history. typo. Source image. I'm going to paste this, and I'm also going to paste a link, a direct link to the image. This isn't a fantasy map, but it could be used for history, art history, or modern. And that is it. Our map is published. On part 2, I'm going to show you how to use the full resolution image with the custom tools to make a scenario. We might also, excuse me, we might also look at using SVG tools to get a cleaner version of a full resolution of this map. For example, removing the shadows of mountains that gave us so much trouble earlier on. But for now, this is it. I hope you enjoyed. I hope this was useful to you. Bye.